So I'm gonna go ahead and start my stream.
Alright, and then I'll start mine.
Hey, I'm on
Okay.
share stream, by the way.
All right. So we have started streaming. This is Humane Mind episode 28. So we are talking about religion again. So this is Heavenly Father and the Burden of Proof part 2.
Alright, let me start
So,
mine. Alright.
all right. And
By the way, I'm just gonna moderate. I'm gonna leave not that long because I'm in share stream as well.
Okay.
all
And
right.
we are live. We are live. How's everyone doing today? I'm joined with Humane Mind, and I got Mr. Insanity moderating. Okay, so back in October, me and Humane and a couple others debated for about an hour and a half to two that over the existence of God and religion in general, and for a while that seemed to be the end of it. For context, on Twitter back in January, I think mid-January, there was a heated argument, or at least heated back and forth between me, Humane, and Jossman
Wow,
over
was it
the
really
existence of
January?
God.
That long
Huh?
ago?
Yeah, a little,
Wow.
almost 2.5 months ago. I think to the day, actually. I can't remember. But
All right.
yeah, it was rather heated. Uh, the I'm not gonna lie, when you insulted Jossman the way you did, I laughed my ass off reading that. But
Well,
I mean, I can understand. I get where you come from as to why you were you reacted the way you did towards me and Jossman. Basically, it came down to this. This is an argument that I didn't come up with, but I've seen atheists like Owen who proposed the argument as me and him were discussing after a live stream why he doesn't believe in God. And he has said to me, he says, S-Man, the burden of proof, like they make a claim, they can't back it up, doesn't
yeah.
necessarily mean that claim is invalid. However, it means that claim, you can a claim without evidence can be dismissed without evidence was basically the gist of what he
Yes.
said.
And
And
I
I
agree
will,
with that
yeah,
sentiment.
yeah, and I will also say this, that I can understand the point you bring up, which you brought up. I can't look at the chat. I just can't. But yeah, not our live chats, but the other one.
Gotcha.
But yeah, as it turns out, Humane would bring up a point which, after thinking about this for a good 2.5 months now, makes sense. That while we cannot directly observe the black hole, well, yeah, we can observe it, but we obviously can't go up to it like 5 feet away from it and be like, oh wow, that's a cool black hole. I mean, I get where you come from when you bring that up about things
Yeah.
that we can't
The
directly
by
observe.
by its very definition, a black hole is unobservable. Because in order for something to be observed, it has to be something that we can sense with our five senses, unless we have some kind of sixth sense that no one's ever talked about or no one's ever discovered. But we've only had five senses, and all of those senses rely on particles either coming from some other object or particles bouncing off of some other object. But the way a black hole works is particles go in and nothing comes out.
That is
So
true.
so we cannot observe it with any type of even all of our instruments, all of our tools for measuring thing, they all have to register something coming back. The best we can do is indirectly observe a black hole. And the funny thing is a black hole, yes, it makes sense logically, and there's math behind it, and that's why we like so it came out of theoreticals like okay, theoretically a black hole is possible, and now we're like okay, well theoretically it's possible, let's go out and look for it in the universe. And that's perfectly valid science. And yet when you go to religion, you're like okay, theoretically the existence of some kind of deity is possible. But it's kind of like, oh, but don't bother looking for it. There's no point. And I'm like, wait, what? Why is one of these instances perfectly rational to look for and to think, okay, this is something that is worth searching for and spending your entire life trying to find. I mean, that's what scientists are doing right now. That many of them dedicated their entire careers and their lives to get that career, just trying to be the
Wait,
first guy who
how
says,
is
"I
it
proved a
possible
black
that it can't
hole."
prove it was humane?
Hang on a second. What?
How is it possible? How is it possible if we can't prove that it exists
Well, there's
whatsoever?
same way as a black hole. I think that there's indirect observation and logical conclusions that you can come to deduce that there is a God. And so, because if you eliminate all other possibilities, which I think I've done, I don't know if I have. I mean, I have yet to come up or yet to hear somebody come up with a viable alternative to how we got here outside of God, because all of the other explanations, they leave more questions than they answer. And if you try to apply Occam's razor successfully, it's the explanation that requires the fewest amount of assumptions is the most likely explanation for what we're observing. Yet when you're talking about like multiverse theory, when you're talking about a digital universe, other propositions are an infinitely expanding universe, or that the universe has been here for forever and will continue to be here for forever. All of these explanations as to how we got here, they create more problems than they solve. The infinite universe, or the multiverse theory, it's like, oh, we're just one of many universes, and that's why our universe is structured and it's observable. And you're like, well, that means in one of those universes, there has to be, because of the definition of infinity, there has to be crazy universes that defy all reason because they're not bound by ordered rules of the universe. There has to be a universe where everybody's a superhero because of the laws of infinity. The laws of infinity is anything that is possible given enough iterations, right? This is when you come down to probability, right? You got a 1 in 1 million chance. Well, if you get 1 million tries, that means you have a guaranteed chance. Hey, as long as it's 1 in 350 trillion. Oh, okay. Well, if I've got 350 trillion tries, I'm going to get that one. It's all of those attempts. Eventually, I'm going to get that one that succeeds. So even if the odds of having a universe where there is a God is statistically improbable, when you apply infinity to that concept, it's not only probable, it has to happen in infinity. It's the way infinity works. With given enough time, given enough possibilities, everything happens. And that is just pure insanity. To think that there are universes where everybody is... I mean, this is what would happen with a multiverse theory with an infinite amount of multiverses. There are entire planets where everybody is S-Man. Everybody is S-Man. That has to happen. It's not that it's... And when you think, okay, and there's entire planets where everybody eats from their asshole and shits out of their mouth. That has to happen because the mathematics of probability work that every possibility has to happen. It's the what is that? If you give a million monkeys typewriters and give them an infinite amount of time, one of them will make the complete works of Shakespeare, including the punctuation. And you're like, that is the stupidest, most absurd thing that you can think of, and yet that's the currently accepted definition, or the currently accepted explanation of how life got here. I don't know if it's the most... it's the one that everybody that I've talked to, and the one that seems to have the most weight with other people as they're talking about this multiverse theory. It's like, well, there are an infinite number of universes, and the only reason we can observe ours is just because we happen to have a ordered universe, and so by definition, an ordered universe has to be observable. Or I think it was the other way around. By definition, an observable universe would have to be ordered. Sorry, yeah, that's the... Okay. In order for us to observe it, it has to have set rules of order, which it seems to have.
Okay,
you want me to say something then? Oh,
yeah.
Sure, well, I was gonna mention.
This is gonna be my last. Well, no, I mean, I'm gonna go in chairs. I'm already in the stream, but I'm just gonna head out. I might show back up later.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Sure.
All right, HUMANe. Okay. But do you really? Okay, so I ask everyone this. How did God get here exactly? Like,
Well, see, this is the thing where I've heard a lot of explanations, and even Stefan Monalou, I highly respect him. He tried to do the same thing when in his book, what's it called? Against the Gods, or I think that's the name of the book. I can't remember which one of those books exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's Against the Gods is his book about this, where he talks about if there was a deity being, it wouldn't be very complex because it wouldn't have to evolve. And I'm like, wait a minute. why are you applying physical properties to this deity? Because my understanding of it is our universe has rules that everything in the universe has to abide by. But when you're talking about something outside of our universe that created that universe, those rules no longer apply to whatever's outside. You can't. I'm trying to come up with a good explanation. I don't know if you guys are. Maybe this analogy will work for you guys, because this works for really well for me as a computer programmer. I'm a computer programmer by trade. I can write applications, and all those applications, they have defined rules that application must abide by. But those rules don't apply to me. And that's the same kind of relationship I would see with a deity creating a universe. Is, yes, there are fixed rules in place for the universe, but to apply, and so the universe has to have an origin point, but to apply an origin point to something outside of that universe doesn't quite follow. Because by being outside of our observable universe, you're already breaking the rules. By being outside of my application, I'm not bound by the rules of that application, and I can break those rules at whim. I can go into that application and change the entire structure of that application at will, because I am in complete control of that creation. So saying that something outside of the universe that created the universe would be subject to the laws of evolution? No, that's not all. It could be. I mean, it's very possible that something outside of the universe has to have an origin, but it could be that something outside of the universe is immortal and is infinite, because it's not bound by our rules. So, and again, this is not proof of a god.
Exist.
What? Well,
so I'm not saying that this is proof that God has to exist. I'm saying if a God did exist, a deity in the way that a deity that created everything that we can observe in our universe, that deity wouldn't be bound by the rules that we are applying to everything else.
Okay, so this is something I've noticed when people talk about whether or not God exists. Is that you with religions, you'll see like Islam, Christianity, etc. They all believe in a higher power, obviously. Who's okay? I have earbuds in. You
Mr.
do.
Insanity.
Do you have earbuds in?
Mute yourself.
I'll mute them. Hang on. Well, yeah. Actually, I'll just lower the volume. But yeah, basically, the big problem that always made me hesitant to believe in a god is that you have different religions with a belief in God, but there's always be a little bit of a difference. Huh?
Yeah, that's Echo on. I'm gonna go ahead and mute him so that way you're not interrupting yourself. Oh, never mind.
Okay. So basically, the idea is that there's multiple denominations to Christianity.
Yes.
Some refuse to even acknowledge the existence of each other, and I think that's how the term Christian atheism was coined. Then you got
atheism.
Yeah, I think that was
that's a new one for me.
Really? I heard about it
never
back
heard
in
that.
earlier 2017. Yeah, actually, let me go to let me see the official definition. But while I do that, basically, it's that for a Christian, for instance, to say no, Islam is bullshit or it's incorrect, the standard you would use to try and debunk Islam, you would have to find a way to not have that apply to Christianity, and vice versa. Okay, so the Christian atheism is a form of cultural Christianity and a system of ethics which draws its beliefs from practices from the life and the teachings of Jesus Christ as recorded in the Gospels of the New Testament and other sources, while rejecting supernatural claims of Christianity at large. Okay, so that apparently the other denominations refusing to acknowledge each other is apparently not Christian atheism. I thought that was what it was. But yeah, it is. It sounds like an oxymoron if you don't look into the term. Right
no, I mean that's to say that would be similar to objectivism or maybe not the Socratic method, because that's more of a thought process, but if you are a philosophy student and you are an objectivist, which is someone who follows the philosophy of Ayn Rand, right?
Mm.
They don't worship Ayn Rand as a deity, although some are a little too extreme on it. But it's the okay. These are the teachings of that person. They're good and they're sound and they're valid. And when you apply them to your life, you tend to have a better overall life because you are attaining the goals that you've set for yourself. That's so it's a okay, this is what I want from my life as long as I abide by the principles laid out here. They're sound logically, and when I apply them in my life, they get me the result that I'm expected to get. So that's what the kind of the objectivists are. They're applying rational reason and anything that they cannot rationalize, they don't do. Um, and I'm all for the objectivist viewpoint. I think it's actually one of the better philosophies that has arisen. The one problem I have with it is the outright rejection of religion, um, in all of its forms. So what I think that creates a problem, and this is something we discussed when Loudmouth was on a couple of weeks ago when he was talking about religion and how there's this viewpoint that all religion is bad because of what it started out as. Because they view it all as fairy tales and superstitions, and this is a concept that has never sat well with me. Because superstitions, there is no proof. Like okay, if a black cat crosses your path, okay, you're gonna have bad luck. That's the superstitious point of view, and yet how many times does a black cat cross your path and nothing out of it? I mean, you have the exact same results as anybody else who's never had a black cat cross their path. So you can kind of rule it out as like, well, this seems to be it seems to have no impact on my life or things like that. Same thing with breaking a mirror and you'll have 7 years of bad luck and all. Like those are like okay, there doesn't seem to be any testable results with those sorts of things. But when you look at the lifestyles of Christians, and this is something you can prove statistically, higher rates of sustainable marriages, as in less divorce overall, less crime rate, higher incomes, bigger families, higher incomes, and higher reported happiness. This is self-reported, obviously, because these are statistics of, how happy are you on a scale from 1 to 10? It's like, well, I mean, there is a...
Well, the reason...
that's not exactly quantifiable, but it's at least something to go off of when you compare that to non-religious people. They tend to be lower on every one of those metrics, is like, family size, total income, and reported happiness.
Okay.
Well, the reason those people are happier is because they believe in a fairy tale and
okay. So let's say it is a fairy tale, right? Let's say it's all bunk. There is no God, and it's okay. So is it better to believe a lie and be happier, and have a better life overall, or to know that to accept that it's a lie and try to convince everybody that it's a lie? And then be miserable for it, and be more miserable, and less successful.
Try to convince anyone. That's the thing. I'd rather believe the truth. I don't have to convince people.
I'm gonna answer this. So basically, I'll say this: I don't blame people for believing in God. I truly don't. Like, even though I've never believed in God my entire life, and I was a pantheistic, then agnostic, I can understand why some people would need that to get through their day-to-day lives. Like, I guess you could call it personal religion, where you believe in God, but you're not subscribed to any specific religion. You just believe in God to get yourself through the day or other reasons. That's fine. Organized religion, I'm not too much of a fan of either, but I'll say this, that overall, it's just hard. I don't know. What you've said that you believe, from your point of view, that God is a hands-off type of God, that he won't do anything, or he does not do anything to impact or change the world.
Yeah.
And I will say that if you want to believe in God, that's fine. However, when coming back to what you said about lower crime rates, happier marriages, and so on and so forth, the majority of the country is Christian, or at least at the very least religious. So, and I'm gonna see if I can find statistics on this.
So there are statistics about atheists and their crime rates. So, the issue there is it always tends to be all religions grouped together. And that's something I tried to emphasize with Loudmouth is like there's definitely a distinction between different types of religion. Like how many? So I mean, you may think all religions are evil, but how many Buddhists have ever done any? Okay, yeah, sure. There's plenty of Christians, right? There's the Spanish Inquisition, there's the Crusades, and then there's when you talk about Muslims, there's bombings and there's all kinds of massive brutality. How many uprisings have there been in the Buddhist religion? How many Buddhists have led a revolution or violent revolution? How many Buddhists have killed people? Oh, so maybe we shouldn't put Buddhism in the same boat that we put Islam and Christianity.
Yeah, I'll
right?
say that it is important to be more like when they just say religious and non-religious. I want them to be more specific. For instance, if you're going to say religion, specify the one. And the problem I also have is there's 4,200 religions in the world. That to me is ridiculous.
Yeah, that is.
You got all these denominations of these religions. So if you believe in a God, if you believe in a certain denomination, you also have to try and find a way to disprove the other denomination, but still say that your denomination, if you are a part of one, is valid. But I also, as I'm trying to find this right now,
and that is a big challenge.
Yes,
that's what
I'm trying to. Yeah,
okay.
As I'm attempting to find the statistics about, I'm going to go to Pew Research because I do trust them quite a bit. I do have to say that it is. I'm not sure if correlation would be causation on the.
Yeah, that's the issue with those particular statistics, because people who tend to be atheists tend to be smarter individuals. Which, if you look at just IQ in general, typically higher incomes, typically less crime. That's so to say that it's due to their atheism as opposed to if those same intelligent people had been religious, would they suddenly increase their crime rate?
Yeah,
I don't think that is.
The
other thing that I pointed out in one of these other is because somebody pointed out, I don't remember if that was you or if that was maybe somebody else I was talking to. It might have been Ham when they were talking about prison populations and the amount of religious people.
That was me.
Those studies don't say when those people converted, which is the vast majority of people who become Muslim or people who are in prison that are Muslim converted inside the prison.
Yeah, okay, I'll concede that point that it doesn't say when they converted, but when it comes to the atheists, when it comes to them with depression or crime rate, it also doesn't say how long they've been an atheist or remove themselves from religion. And I'll also say that I strongly agree that just because you might believe in a God or you might not doesn't necessarily mean you're dumb or you're unintelligent. I tend to really have a strong dislike for the militant atheists, anti-theists. I'm not I'm not opposed to theism. I'm just not a theist. But I'll also say that, I do have some criticisms for atheists. Like some of them are way more intolerant than some of the Christians I've encountered in my time in the state of Utah and throughout the country. That, well, if you don't believe in God, you don't have to have the holier than thou attitude about it. If you do believe in God, you still the same point. I can't remember if it was you or what I think it was you who mentioned, as we were talking about atheists who are legally barred from pursuing public office.
So
what was that about? I brought that up, and I can't remember what you said. Like, those laws aren't enforced.
Yeah, they are not enforced. They are on the books, but then again, there's laws about not parking your elephant on the sidewalk on a Sunday. Those types of things they're on the books, but it matters is if they are enforced. So those, if you look at most of those laws, they're from like
200 years ago.
Probably before 1950s and stuff like that, when the whole nation was more religious than it is right now. And especially the entire nation was more Christian in its religion, whereas now we still have it's less religious overall, but we also have a bunch of different types of religion. Like back in the 1940s and 50s, there were no Wiccans. Now Wiccan is,
Relatively common.
Yeah, it's surprisingly common, which I don't understand that at all because that seemed like a bunch of nonsense. I haven't investigated, so yes, I have not given it its fair shake, but I have given at least some of the other ones that I've been able to encounter. And I just ended my Bible studies with the Mormons because they were asking me to outright reject my understanding and my reasoning and just believe blindly. I'm like, no, that's not how any of this works. I can understand believing without seeing. That's something that makes sense. It's like, okay, I don't think that that's possible, but I'm going to trust that happens and then see if the results match what I'm supposed to expect the results to be. That seems plausible. But to trust and believe in something that cannot be, that is actually, that contradicts, yeah, that's, okay, I'm going to go off on a little rant about Mormons. So they're supposed to be, the Book of Mormon is supposed to be another gospel of Jesus Christ, and yet it contradicts the Bible. It contradicts the 4 gospels that talk about Jesus Christ in the Bible, and you're like, how can your book contradict this other book? And you just say, oh no, it's just an appendment. And you're like, no, appendments, like if it's what you're talking about is something that overrides the original text, in which case you're overriding the original text with something that can be put down to one guy. Like the Bible, there's a bunch of different authors. I think it's 36 different authors, or no, it's 36 different books. And there's I know it's more than 20 different authors when you're talking about the the King James Version Bible. There's a bunch of different authors, and they're all throughout different periods of time. The Book of Mormon, it's one guy at one period of time in his lifetime. His book contradicts itself. It contradicts the New Testament. There's quoted passages from the New Testament, and you're like, wait a minute, this book is supposed to be 700 years before Jesus was born. How can you be quoting what Paul is writing? That doesn't make any sense.
It's actually much worse than that when it comes to the Book of Mormon, because he claimed that he could. I'm sorry, Joseph Smith. He claimed that he could translate Egyptian hieroglyphics using these magic seer stones.
Yeah, it wasn't even Egyptian. It was an Egyptian Jewish hybrid language. It was an Egyptian Hebrew hybrid language. And you're like, wait a minute, you don't know Egyptian, you don't know Hebrew, and yet suddenly...
Hold on. It was at a time before the Rosetta Stone had been discovered, and thus this was at a time when Egyptian hieroglyphics couldn't be read. Okay? Yeah. And he claimed that was the one who could read them, and he came up with a lot of translations. Then when they were properly translated with the Rosetta Stone, it turned out that Joseph Smith's translations were complete bullshit.
Oh yeah, he translated another book outside of the Book of Mormon, and the Mormons just ignore that other book because that other book was completely wrong.
Yeah, I absolutely adored the South Park episode all about Mormons, because when I first watched that, I wasn't really sure what to make of it, but it kind of encouraged me to do research, and it's hilarious how accurate that episode is.
Yeah, they are really, really nice people. But they outright reject reality when they're in order for their faith to make sense. They outright reject reality, which is something that if there is a God plays by the rules he set for himself when it concerns the universe. Outside of the universe, as far as creating it and all of that sort of thing, he's not bound by rules. But what's the point of creating a universe that has set rules if you're just going to ignore them all? So that's my view of a God is, okay, you make a world, you put rules and order in place, and if you read at least the God of the Bible is all about order and all about structure. And it's the order in the chaos. Everything, like in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And,
but the Bible itself also contradicts itself innumerable times. For example, the Gospels all give very contradictory accounts of basically Jesus' resurrection. They contradict themselves on how many women were there, what time they arrived, whether Jesus was already out of the tomb, or whether the rock that covered the tomb was already unrolled, or whether they watched a couple angels unroll it. These stories totally contradict each other.
Not if they're from different perspectives. because there's 4 different people telling the story, and so what one person saw, another person didn't see. That's
can I say something?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Sure.
So can I say something? You do realize that all these religious books. You look at the Jewish book, you look at the Christian book, you look at the Muslim book. For instance, do you know why Jewish people don't eat meat? For instance, a simple thing.
Well, they eat meat. They just don't eat certain types of meat.
I'm sorry, pork. They don't eat pork. Because pork was a hard meat to retain as fresh, let's say, in the olden days.
Yeah.
If you look at the Bible, if you look at, for instance, another simple example, it is a simple thing like this: what is the best way for you to not have STDs?
Oh, just don't have sex.
Don't have sex. Exactly.
Well, do it by doing.
If you look at every single religion, there will be abstinence, right? Because they don't want to transmit STDs. If you look at religions, every single one, from a perspective where these guidelines that they implemented in their time, you will find that they actually, they're simple. They actually represent a thing for a society at that time, if you know what I'm saying.
If you.
But they have their Christianity, Jewish religion, all these things about being kosher and whatnot. They have their place in their time. There are guidelines. Religion and the books of every single religion are guidelines. If you look at them as guidelines for the time at when they were created, they make sense. In 2018, probably not so much.
Well, I mean, if you look at the instructions in Deuteronomy and Leviticus and things along those lines, it's primarily about diet and hygiene. I mean, that's like 80 to 90% of the rules people had to follow were concerning diet and hygiene. There's a little bit about
a lot of it is animal cruelty. A lot of it is encouraging animal sacrifice and animal cruelty.
Okay.
Okay.
So now your animal cruelty. It seems like an odd position to take because you're not a vegan, right? You're not a vegetarian.
No, I'm not a vegan.
No, okay. But I get it. I get what you're saying. Yeah, sure, fair enough.
All right.
Okay.
It seems like an odd, like, oh, well, they're just killing animals for no good reason. It's like, well, you're assuming there's no purpose behind it. How do you know that there's no purpose
to the
behind
Lord
it?
Because the Lord is drunk with blood, basically.
Well, that's one perspective, I guess. The other perspective is there are rules to the universe that were set in place, and then once the universe is running, those rules have to be followed. And when they're not followed, well, then things have to be done in order to correct for that. And that's what the Bible is talking about. When Adam sinned and disobeyed, that introduced death into the world. And in order to correct that error, because he was a perfect man, right? That's the explanation the Bible gives. Is Adam was the perfect man, created from directly by God, should have lived eternally in paradise, but he sinned and introduced death into the world. And the only way to make up for that loss or that debt that is now incurred is to sacrifice life for life. Now, in a case of animal lives are not.
God was all knowing.
What?
Yeah, but if God was all knowing, why did he let? Okay,
think about what you're saying.
Listen. If God was all knowing, why did he let Adam and Eve pick from the tree of what was it? Tree of God?
Yeah. Why would he even put that tree in there?
If God was all knowing, he would have known that Adam and Eve were going to do that.
Well, how do you know that wasn't the purpose to begin with?
the God. Okay, well, God's a
Yeah.
douchebag. Then that's my point.
Yes, exactly. The God of the
how
Bible
does that make God a
possibly the
douchebag?
most loathsome character in all fiction. The God of the Bible is a monster.
How
And I'm
so?
very happy that God doesn't
Okay.
I mean,
exist.
hell,
So,
Baphomet's more
so
moral than
okay.
God.
J.R.R.
sorry.
Tolkien
I
is
have
an
to- I have
absolute
to-
monster
I have
because
to-
he. Hey. J.R.R. Tolkien is an absolute monster because he creates this universe, this world of Middle Earth. He puts characters in it, gives them a something to overcome, and then they overcome it. Oh, he's an absolute monster.
Those are characters. These aren't real
How?
people.
Okay, to a god, how are we not different from fictional characters? It's his
I'm sorry.
playbox.
Because
Can I say something?
exist.
You're looking at religion as something that is absolute and true and things like that. You have to understand that religion, the books. You look at. I don't really care about the religion, but I know enough about religion. The Muslim religion, the
Okay.
Roman Catholic religion, the religion that I was born and raised in,
Okay.
is that these are guidelines that if you look at the books, if you look at the teachings,
Oh, okay.
these are nothing but guidelines for a decent living.
From your perspective,
Decent living comes in let's say quotes, right? Because if you say that a Catholic decent living is somewhat different from a Muslim decent of living, from a Jewish decent living, from a Taoist and Maoist and a Buddhist, actually, I really like the Buddhist way of living.
one of those is not a religion,
And I was raised
right?
And I was raised Roman Catholic, and I really like the way that the Buddhists see life. It's interesting to me. I find it more interesting. But these are just guidelines.
Well, that's what you say. I say that there's three different ways of looking at this.
This is the problem, and this is the problem. And this is just to say this. And I wanted to, this is a preface to say this. Religious extremism, and we are now seeing a lot of Muslim religion extremism, that comes from these guidelines being enforced to their core. And these guidelines, they were effective. They were good in the, I don't know, the second century.
I would disagree with you about Muslims, the Muslim doctrine being good.
But they are not enforced, but they are not, let's say, actually feasible in 2018. You look at the Pope. You look at the Pope. You look at the popes. The popes.
Well, that's good.
For the first time in our generation, a pope that didn't die. A pope that didn't die and left his place to give.
A pope who didn't die until he eventually will.
No, he didn't die in office. All the other popes were pope when they died. He relinquished his pope title. That's what he said.
I know what he meant. I was just making kind of a joke.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is
well, the problem with that perspective,
you have to understand this. The Roman Catholic religion has tried to, let's say, evolve in order to to relate to their people, right?
And they would have had a much easier time and a much better time of doing that had they not stuck by the doctrines of Constantine of incorporating the church with pagan customs and pagan religion. Because a good portion of what Catholics believe and practice is not in the Bible, it's not in the Torah, it has nothing to do with any of those original documents.
Yes, but the Bible from the very beginning
is the evolution of church. That's the evolution of church.
Yeah.
That is actually the antithesis of their doctrine. Their actual scriptures say do not associate with pagan customs and pagan religions.
Yes, it is.
No, the actual book says you cannot serve God and mammon, right? That's what the actual text says. So it says you are supposed to abstain from any type of worship or any type of practice or any type of custom that is associated with these other pagan religions because you cannot serve both masters. That's what the actual Bible says. And the Catholics, by incorporating these other religions into their religion, into Catholicism, in order to attract a wider audience, they did just that. They tried to marry the doctrine of the Bible with paganism.
Right? You know what a Christmas wreath is? That's a pagan fertility wreath.
Yeah. Everything about Christmas is almost exactly taken from pagan ritual and pagan holidays.
Well,
the fact that it happens on the shortest day of the calendar year, that's part of the birth of the sun god, which either was Ra or what's the other one?
I actually heard it was the birthday of Hercules.
It's not the birthday of Hercules. It is a ritual about the sun god, because this is a ritual that they would practice because the days are getting shorter, and so they think, oh, we've angered the sun god, we need to have a celebration, and either to win favor with the sun god or to celebrate the rebirth of the sun god. There's two different variations, and that's where you get the Christmas tree to begin with, and why there's a bright star on top. And the Catholicism were like, oh, well, they're already doing this ceremony, let's just change that star on top to be the star over Bethlehem. Let's just change the tree, we'll add some ornaments on it and that sort of thing. Instead of burning the tree as a ritual, we'll just put gifts underneath it because the wise men brought gifts. They married the two rituals together in order to make it, fun. It's a bastardization of what the original text says. Don't do these sorts of things. Don't do those.
Park episode a few years ago that parodied the Da Vinci Code, where that had.
About the Easter and the rabbit, right? Yeah, the original rabbit, Peter Rabbit. Yeah,
Yes, that I thought was fucking brilliant.
Well, the entire Easter, that's all fertility ritual. That's why it's a bunny, because bunnies are associated with spring and having lots of kids. And you're like, that has nothing to do with Christianity, has nothing to do with the works of Christ, has nothing to do with anything that's in the Bible itself.
Well, one of God's creatures, so that's a good that way. But putting on my Kirk Cameron hat.
Well, but the entire the celebration of Easter and why it happens on that particular, sometimes they do it on Easter is celebrated around Passover, which makes sense given that Jesus died the day after Passover, according to the Bible, and then was resurrected 3 days later, and yet Easter doesn't always fall on that particular day. It should be 3 days after Passover, because Passover is based on the lunar calendar. It's a specific set time. This year, the actual 3 days after Passover is actually this Saturday. That's the actual date. And then next year, it will be Sunday. And then next year, it'll be Monday, I believe. Unless there's a leap year. Wait, what's the next leap? Next year is, 2020. So it skips a day somewhere. But it's not always on Sunday. And yet Easter is celebrated on Sunday. So it doesn't always line up exactly. Oh.
I just joined them.
As far as I know, you are not muted at the moment. Sorry about that. But yeah, we're trying to let other people talk in.
Not you, Jocelyn. It was the guy Ivan. I don't know how he got in, but
yeah. So there's one thing that Ivan kept hammering home is like it's just guidelines. Well, if you're reading the books, they actually say it's not just guidelines. They say there are guidelines and there are beneficial guidelines, but there's more to it. And if those books are accurate and you're following them just as guidelines, you are not following them correctly. And you're not in God's graces. You are not following the doctrine, and you're not actually working and walking with God. And when it comes to the judgment day, he's going to say, leave me, I never knew you. So
yes and no.
If that is the possibility, so I'm just saying if, right? There's three different ways you can look at it. Either the Bible is absolute BS and should be ignored outright completely, just nothing in it is viable, or it is a book full of sound advice that you should follow the advice that helps you to live as a better person, or it is an actual instructions from the creator of the universe.
You are looking at it.
I don't know if those.
At it from the point of absolutes.
I am saying those are three different ways of looking at it. So right now, I am looking at it from if they are absolutely true and actually instructions from the creator. They could be. They could be just absolute BS, just whatever men created to try to control people, which is what most atheists believe. That could be the case. It could be the case. Would you like me to argue from that perspective?
Look, what I'm saying is, look at the religious books. Every single religious books as guidelines for life.
Are you an
Okay, and some of those religious books talk about killing. Some of those religious books talk about killing. Hey, some of those religious books talk about killing homosexuals. They talk about stoning your own children.
Hold on. Hold on.
Hey, that's a guide. Hey, that's a guideline for life. Is we have to kill all homosexuals and we have to stone our own kids for disobedience.
The book of Exodus says it's okay to sell your daughter into slavery.
Yeah.
Fuck the Bible's guidelines.
Yeah, I don't care. Like, if God's true, then I'm not gonna follow him anyway. Send me to hell.
Doesn't it justify?
Shit.
Let me find the Bible verse that says women can't teach or suppose. There's something about you can't speak over a man or you can't teach a man. Or
yeah, I think that's First John verse 2. It says don't mansplain. I think that's exactly that's a direct quote. Do not mansplain. Or sorry, thou shalt not mansplain.
You're gonna make me be the devil's advocate on religious books because I don't want
that's
to
what
be
you
that guy,
that's what you put
but
me
I would do
in.
that.
So you said that I was arguing from an absolute. So now I'm arguing from the opposite perspective.
Yeah,
Because
I
that's
want
what
to
I'm
argue.
trying to do.
Look,
Is I'm trying to see from all three different perspectives.
The one thing that I want to say is this. It's simple. Look at the books, at the texts. Every single religion, look at them from a perspective of guidelines for life.
Well, then you're going to have to pick and choose which guidelines.
In their time.
You're going to have to pick and choose which
Never a
guidelines.
time where it was moral to sell your daughter into slavery. That was not immoral 5,000 years ago any more than it is today. It's just that people's moral perspectives have evolved. But that was still an evil, barbaric action.
I'm sorry, but you cannot argue that in a
Yes, you can.
conscious manner.
Yes, you can, because the Bible specifically says that. If you look at the Quran, it specifically says, kill your...
cultures, they would sell their daughters, they would sell their kids, and they would have, like, these arranged marriages.
Yes.
From,
and is that moral?
Children, younger than 6 or 7 years old, they would arrange these marriages, and the same in Muslim culture.
Is that a moral thing to do? You're taking away. So is that a moral thing to do? I would say no. That is not a moral thing to do. You are removing the free will from those individuals.
I'm not saying that is wrong. That it's right. It is wrong.
You are saying that it's right if you're saying the religious texts are guidelines.
Wrong. The religious text, if you look at the Bible, if you look at the Quran, if you look at the Torah, for instance, the Torah and the Jewish books, they say that the Jewish people is the supreme people of the planet and shit like that. If you look at the Muslim book, they say that the Muslim, the Jewish books say that the Jewish are the chosen ones. You look at the Muslim books, they say that Muslims are the chosen one.
So they both can't be correct. So then they both can't be just good guidelines.
Come on, guys, come on.
They both can be. You can't just treat them as their guidelines when one is more correct than the other. That's how it has to be. If they both have contradicting information, one has to be more correct than the other, or they're both wrong. The problem that I have with atheists is they all say, "Oh, they're all wrong," and you're like, "Well, how do you know? You haven't actually looked into them or bothered to compare them." I would say you can look at the fruits that are presented when out of the Muslim religion. Look at the fruits, even if you're not considering terrorism and all of that sort of thing. Look at the countries that are predominantly Muslim. They are uneducated. They don't have plumbing. They, very poor. Even some of these countries like Saudi Arabia has a massive wealth in oil, and yet it is a destitute country.
Yes,
so
that is true.
If you look at these countries that are predominantly Muslim, they are third world, and the people there are miserable. So you can't. So to say that this is a good set of guidelines for a good life doesn't make sense to me.
On why religious books are wrong.
I would say that particular religious book is wrong because it all stems from this Muhammad guy, and this Muhammad guy started a cult and then turned it into his warlord empire.
At the Middle Ages in Europe, if you look at the Middle Ages in Europe, and I'm Portuguese, so I have a very good assumption of this, and I can tell you this: the Middle Ages in Europe was a time of evolution.
Yes.
The world, it's a stagnation. The Middle Ages.
And if you look at it, it was also a huge rejection of religion.
And if you look at the Muslim world right now, when Islam was implemented, you see the exact same stagnation, religious stagnation.
And here's the big difference.
Just to finish, you look at the after World War II, the Geneva Convention about Human Rights. You know.
Why did you skip from the Middle Ages all the way to World War II? Look after the immediate phase after the Middle Ages. That's a better indicator. It's like, hey, no. That's a better indicator. It's a better indicator. Middle Ages, everybody is worse off, right? Everybody's pretty bad.
Renaissance. You want to look at from the Middle Ages to Renaissance.
All right. So, I muted you, and here's why. So, okay, Middle Ages, the Middle East and the Europe, for the most part, pretty much in the same boat. Very, very little difference between the two. After the Middle Ages, Europe started becoming more industrialized, and there was a massive shift towards religion, not away from it. There was a massive shift towards religion and towards Christianity as a whole. It ended up becoming a problem for them, but you can see this massive explosion in European development from a state where they're living in castles and all that sort of, to where they actually have like towns and where they're actually getting agricultural advancements and things like that. And then some, 1,000+ years later, you look at the Middle East, they're still exactly where they were. They're still exactly where they were 2,000 years prior, whereas Europe,
are you talking about?
We're talking about just after the Middle Ages. Just after the Middle Ages, you're starting to see these massive advancements in Europe, and you're not seeing massive advancements.
Check your DMs, HUMANe. Anyway, Jocelyn, you just said, sounds like you made a contradiction there. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sorry, who?
Yeah, you said it could be right, but it is wrong. But it could be right though. It seems like it's a contradiction there. Now maybe you want to explain that. But
I don't know. That's the position I'm in right now. I don't know.
Make the same claim. That
you don't understand that.
All right, go ahead and boot Ivan. I'm sorry, man. We tried to let you hang out here, but you're not one of us, and you keep interrupting, and you want to speak for forever, which...
I'm sorry. My bad.
You try to make one claim at a time, and then allow someone to respond to that claim. That's what we're trying to do here. We're not doing the gish galloping, I'm going to make 50 points, so that way you can't rebut anything. That's not a good way to build a case, is one point at a time, which I've tried to do. I don't know if we've been successful in that, because the conversation keeps shifting. But... we're talking about one point at a time, and when you mentioned the Middle Ages, the point was everybody was kind of in the same boat. The Middle East and Europe were both on par with one another. Europe saw this massive increase in the same period of time where the Middle East has stayed exactly the same as where it was during the Middle Ages. It has not advanced beyond that. Occasionally there's small pockets of advancement, like Iran dealing with nuclear technology, but 90-something% of those countries are still living in the same abject poverty, in the same conditions that they were living in during the Middle Ages. They have not advanced in some 2,000 years. Europe, for the most part, is very modernized. There are huge areas of Europe that are modernized.
You're not addressing the European development from the Middle Ages to the discoveries. When I say discoveries, the discoveries of Africa and India and whatnot, and their way into the Renaissance age.
Okay, and so what stopped the Middle East? What stopped the Middle East from doing the same?
In those ages, Europe was defined by three things: Middle Ages, the discoveries, Renaissance, and then industrialization.
Yeah, and do you know what defined the Middle East? Jack shit. The Middle East didn't have any of that because they weren't doing anything.
I don't care about the Middle East. Okay?
Well, you should. You should in order to make your point.
I am not educated on the Middle East.
Well, then why did you bring this up? You brought this point up.
I want to bring this point up. Europe evolved three major things.
You got the controller at your disposal, Humane.
Roman Empire, Middle Ages. The three big evolves of Europe was Roman Empire, barbarians, Middle Ages, Dark Ages, discoveries. When I say discoveries, is the Portuguese, the Spanish, the British going out on boats, discovering the world.
Yeah.
And then coming into the Renaissance, and after the Renaissance, industrialization, and after the industrializations, which is the 18th century, you have the colonies, America, South Africa,
I get you, but the point remains: why didn't the Middle East? Because the Middle East started in the same boat. They could have done exactly the same thing.
This is a millennia. I'm talking about the last millennia. Is a definition of European culture being, let's say, being.
I mean, you don't need to list off all these examples. I'm in agreement with you. Yes, Europe progressed. Okay.
This is Europe, and Europe.
Yeah.
Sorry, you kept interrupting. Sorry.
I don't get what your point is, because my point was the Middle East has remained by its same doctrine, its same dogma for 2,000 years, and hasn't done any of the same. They haven't even completed step one of the same formula that Europe did.
It's the last 1,400 years. When Islam was implemented, in the Middle East, that it stopped.
It stopped, yes.
It all stopped.
So then you can't say it's a good guideline. Because it halted all progress, so it's not a good set of guidelines.
Yeah.
It's stagnated that society.
Just so you know, you got the control room.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure. So I'm gonna let you go, man. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the input.
Don't kick him, boy. Don't kick him yet. Ivan, how'd you get in the stream in the first place?
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I want to know how he got here before. I want to know how Ivan got in the stream to begin with. That's what I want to know.
Sorry. I brought. Okay. Let's unmute you. All right. If I can. I think you have to unmute. There we go.
Ivan.
I can tell you how I got into the stream.
How'd you get into the stream?
Because HUMANe Mind actually has me on the message board for the stream. He sends me.
Oh, okay. So you're in the HUMANe Mind stream.
On the message on Twitter, yes.
Yes. Okay.
I'm sorry if I am talking too much. I'm gonna shut up.
Just so you know, Ivan, just so you know, this is gonna be your last.
But the subject about Europe is something that is very,
I'm
triggering.
I'm curious as to because your original point was that these religions are a good guideline, and then you brought up this example and you refused to acknowledge, or you acknowledged that the Middle East stagnated due to Islam being implemented and being the rule of the land for, well, I said 2,000 because I'm rounding it, but it's, closer to 1,400 years, yes. So, 1,400 years of stagnation, and you're saying that these are good orders or good rules to live by. That does not sound like a good way of living if it's going to keep everything from progressing for 1,400 years.
I didn't say that they were good. I didn't say that
they were guidelines. Well, they're terrible guidelines if they're going to stagnate a society.
Yes,
so, by that logic, you can dismiss Islam as a valid religion. Because look at the fruits of it. It's the fruits of it is either terrorist acts where you're killing people, massive jihads, beheading people, butchering people, rape gangs, grooming gangs, where they raise children to be indoctrinated and brainwashed into thinking that their sole purpose in life is to please a man that they've never met, that they're sold off into slavery to. That's what Islam encourages, and it has encouraged for 1,400 years. That's not a good religion. That there's nothing redeemable about that religion.
Look at what I said.
Based on that.
What I said about half an hour ago, that these things that were written in books They were good for about the time that they were written. They are not valid in 2018. None of them. None of them.
Okay.
Don't come and claim that Catholic,
I would disagree with
Islam,
you.
and this and the religion that you want. And I was raised Roman Catholic. They are
Well,
valid.
I think that's
They
part of the
are
problem. If
not
you listen to Richard
valid.
Dawkins, if you listen to Sam Harris, if you listen to a bunch of these atheist thinkers, Catholicism is always the religion that they argue against and what most of them were raised in. And that, I think, is the problem. It's a false dichotomy because Catholicism does not practice Christianity. They say they are Christian, but they don't abide by the primary tenets of that dogma. So I don't understand how they can claim to be Christian. And I know a lot of Catholics are very decent people, and they're trying to do the right thing, but they have been misled. They've been lied to about their religion because their religion does not follow what the actual Bible tells them to do. Like I was saying, they've incorporated all these other traditions, all these other religions. The very act of a confessional, praying to different saints, praying to Mary, all of that is not in the Bible itself. All of that is from pagan religions.
What religion is
the only thing
Ivan,
they keep is the communion.
What religion are you, Ivan? If you have one.
I am Portuguese, therefore I am Roman Catholic.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so like now
Therefore,
it just
you are. Yeah, that's pretty funny.
So you're gonna argue for? Okay, I'm sorry, but you're gonna argue like religion. I don't know. I guess he can, but like it just seems weird to me that because Humane's kind of right here. I'm sorry, I have to.
It's
of course I hate to say I'm sorry, but usually I don't agree with him on religion, but these points that he's making are making sense to me. So
yeah, and
Yeah.
I'd also like to point out that under the religion of Islam, whenever a domestic terrorist attack happens, there are groups. For instance, when the Orlando shooting happened, I attended a candlelight vigil, and there were Muslims there saying, "Look, we don't like the fact this happened. We denounce this," and so on and so forth. Some people say they are the true Muslims. Some people say that the people that endorse the violence are the true Muslims. And
according to the books, yes, the ones who do the violence are abiding more by the doctrine of Islam than the people who are living peacefully and just going through the motions. It's
I said, the books are wrong.
Well, I would say for Islam, yes. I would disagree with you when it comes to
For
actual
all of them.
Christianity.
For even the Roman Catholic book, even the Bible has a lot of shitty things in there.
Okay.
Trust me.
Well, that's where I'm disagreeing with you, and from what I'm
The
seeing
Bible
and
says,
what I'm
the Bible says that also. The Bible also says that you should fight all of them who are not Catholic. The Bible, sorry,
Doesn't
the Bible
say that.
also says yes.
Well,
it does.
give me a chapter and
look,
verse because that's not what the book says.
Look, the Bible is not perfect. Okay?
The Bible does not say that you're supposed to go to war with non-Catholics because Catholic isn't even in the Bible. The word Catholic, the word Christian's not even in the Bible. Those are terms that came after the fact.
Yes. We Roman Catholics look at the Bible, at the New Testament.
Well, my question is, do you?
You look at the Pope. You look at the Pope. Look at the Pope.
Why? Why are you looking at the Pope?
Current Pope. But I'm just going to give you an example.
I get you.
Look at the current Pope. The previous Pope, Ratzinger, which was a German guy that wanted to bring back Latin church and priest things, like going back to Latin things, like Latin masses. You want to go back to Latin masses.
Okay. So my question right now
who's an Argentinian. Let me give you. Just
my question right now is, who are you arguing against at the moment?
Progressive.
I'm afraid to mute him. It's like he's going on 50.
My question is, what point are you arguing against at the moment? Because no one here has argued in favor of Catholicism aside from you.
I am arguing a simple
Hang
point.
on a second. Let's go one at a time.
Roman Catholic and even Christian.
Okay, let's let.
Hang on a second. You're muted. What's?
I'm sorry. because I thought
try to get to a point, because I'm not sure why you're going into all of this detail about the Roman Catholics.
My point is simple.
Okay.
My point is simple. Can I? It's one phrase. Christianity and Roman Catholicism
are not the same religion.
Has evolved. The current Pope agrees with condoms. You look at Islam. You look at Islam. It's the same thing as it was from 14 years ago. It's wrong. Okay.
Okay. So Islam has not evolved. Yes, and Christianity did evolve. Although I would say it went back to its roots during the Protestants, because that's entirely what Martin Luther was saying. He's like, hey, all the stuff we're teaching, it's not in the Bible. That's what his 95 Theses that he nailed to the church door. It's like, hey, these are all the things that we're doing that are actually in violation of our Bible. These are all the practices that we've implemented that the Bible says these are things we're supposed to avoid. These are things we're not supposed to do. And this split off, went into Protestantism, and we've got, because protesting the Catholic Church, Protestants, it's where the term comes from. So that was the church going back to its origins and away from the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church was incorporating paganism, and the Catholic Church became its own government, which is what the Vatican is. It's a government based on religion. It tied the two together, which was never supposed to be what the church was. The church was supposed to be completely independent. If you listen to, or if you read what Jesus was saying in the Gospels, he said that his kingdom is not of this earth. It is something. It is his kingdom is the religion. It is the church, and it is a group of people and a belief system. And there is no government structure. There is no head of the church, because the only head of the church is Jesus Christ. It is not Peter. It's not one of the apostles. It's not their descendants, which doesn't make any sense with Catholicism, because the priests aren't supposed to have kids, because they're taking one scripture that Paul said about how it would be better if you don't have to have kids, that, it gives you more time to devote to the ministry. But they took that as, that means that priests shouldn't have kids at all, which was never the case, because if you look at the apostles, Peter had kids. Peter had a wife and kids before he ever followed Jesus. The only one of the apostles who didn't seem to have kids or a family was Paul. And Paul was the only one advocating that people not have kids if they're going into the ministry, because he's, hey, I don't have any dependents. Nobody is relying on me. I don't have kids or a wife at home wondering and worrying about me. I'm by myself, and that helps me do my ministry even better. So if you can, like me, go out and be by yourself and not have dependents, that's great. If you can't, and you're going to fall into sin because, if you're not able to be solo and in the religion, then have a wife and kids. Do that, because that's the most honorable thing to do, is to do the right thing and have your kids, instead of going out and sleeping around or possibly raping children like what happens in the Catholic Church. So
that's a pretty good point.
A lot of those tenets and a lot of the things that the Catholic Church did, that is the evolution from the original church. The original church went back to its roots in the form of Protestants, and the Protestants were having the Vatican assert its authority over them, and that's why they fled to the New World. They fled to the Americas to get out of the rule of the government that the Vatican had set up.
Against that.
So I'm not sure why you're arguing that Catholicism and Christianity, look at the Catholic church, or the church is talking about condoms now. That's so progressive. No, that's not according to the actual religious book of the Bible. That's why they were against condoms in the first place, because they're like, wait a minute, the Bible says if you're not married to the person, don't have sex with them, then you don't need to worry about condoms. You don't need to worry about spreading STD. The point is, keep it in your pants until you're with the one that you want to spend the rest of your life with, and don't go sleeping around. If you do that, what's the point of a condom?
The best way to not spread an STD is through abstinence.
Yeah. So the very fact that the Catholic Church is now endorsing condoms is kind of going against the advice of the Bible.
If you look again, like I said in the beginning, abstinence is the best way to not spread an STD.
Yes.
Just like you argued.
So the fact that the Pope now says, we're by the way, we support condoms, and then you're saying, what we had originally our advice, our original advice isn't good enough. So now we need to incorporate condoms on top of that, which undermines the doctrine they're trying to preach.
Ivan, hang on a second.
I'll admit it.
All right, well, let's give other people a chance to chime in. Sorry,
okay. So basically, what I'll say is, the policy of just abstinence is something they used to preach, like, you know, and I like gospel, and I, no pun intended. They used to preach that a lot in our schools, and now they preach that they say it's best to, like what HUMANe said, don't sleep with someone until you find the right partner. However, if you're going to, please, for the love of all things holy, use contraceptives, protection in general, but the only way you can truly avoid pregnancy and STDs altogether is if you wait till you get a permanent partner or get married, but they can't force you to do it. Yeah. The idea, like, and it's been done in the state of Texas, is this abstinence-only policy, and it didn't really work, and as a result, the pregnancy rate, I think teens were still getting pregnant, and it wasn't working all that well. So I'll say this: if you want to preach abstinence-only education, that's fine, but you might want to just keep an eye out just in case the teen pregnancy rate doesn't change, or hell, even increases.
Well, so my problem with the teaching that condoms are a viable protection method, because I don't think they actually are a very good protection method. And now when it comes to getting pregnant, well, sperm can go through sperm can pass through latex. So that's why condoms are only so effective. I think it's like 90-something% effective.
Yes.
When used. So there's that 10% chance of something. And so the issue I have with condoms is the same issue that people have with football helmets. Yeah, sure. It's supposed to be protective, right? You're like, oh, I'm wearing these football pads and this football helmet. And what we're seeing when we actually statistically track injuries is because football players are wearing all these pads and stuff, they're being more aggressive in the sport, and it's leading to more injuries, not less injuries. And I would say the same thing logically applies when you're talking about condoms, in that, oh, hey, well, I can't maintain this abstinence thing. Well, there's this condom thing. All right, that's my backup plan. And people are being more risky with their behavior because there's that perception of protection. The same statistics apply to seatbelts. When you have bumpers and seatbelts and you have all these protective measures in your car, you drive more aggressively. Whereas if you have a car without these safety measures, you actually drive more cautiously. You actually don't jerk out in front of people. You don't cut people off because, hey, if I do the wrong thing, I'm going to die because I don't have all these airbags, I don't have seatbelts, I don't have all these safety measures. The more protected you feel, the more risky your behavior becomes. And I think that with condoms, if that's your go-to protective measure, you're going to do more risky behavior because you're like, oh, well, at least I've got this. And it's not it's not a good, it's a better than nothing protective measure, but it's not enough. It's not enough. Yeah.
I will say this, that I can confirm basically that is very true. I can confirm that, if, like with the car analogy, I used to drive and I used to be the passenger of some 23-year-old pickup that was probably not the safest thing to drive, but when that's all you got, that's all you got. Basically, we all had the rule of, seatbelts at all times, and it was not the safest thing to drive, but it worked, and that was all we had. So I can confirm that you're going to be more careful, especially if the tires aren't that great. Fortunately, we got rid of the thing. So basically, that is very true, and that means a whole lot. Cat Chat, who's a Christian, by the way, in the chat says, condoms can break, meds can be duds, or God can just snap his fingers, she says. Why not both? In the chat.
Yeah.
That is true. I've known women who have gotten pregnant due to meds being duds. Yeah. And the condoms can break. Or they can slip right off, and I cannot imagine how you wouldn't notice that. But anyway, condoms are not always effective.
The why not both argument. So the issue that I have with that is, if you're having sex and you know your partner, you know they don't have anything that can spread or that you don't want, then the only thing you're worried about is having a kid, which in my mind is like, well, if you're not prepared to have a kid, why are you engaging in sex that could produce a child? I mean, if you're just wanting to, hey, we want to have a good night with my partner, you can do that all you want, and it's and just no P and V. There's tons of other sexual acts that will not result in her becoming pregnant.
Another just thing. You can do P and V. You just wrap it up.
Well, that's what we were talking about. Is to wrap it up. Well, you're still taking a risk. It's not, instead of it being a 90-something% chance of her getting pregnant, it's a 10% chance of her getting pregnant. But
no, it's like if you put it on properly, it's less than 1% chance.
Not according to statistics. It's not less than 1%.
It is if you put it on properly. It is. It is less than 1%.
No.
If you want, like, I don't know the statistics or what it would be. I would say that on the, like, people aren't putting condoms on correctly.
Because because I've looked up these statistics, and vasectomies are more reliable than condoms. And
of course they are.
They couldn't be the case if condoms were pretty much only 1% off from being effective.
Yeah.
So,
all right, nothing is perfectly effective. Condoms can break. It is possible, and sometimes people are schmucks and don't put them on properly. Or sometimes people try to do an Andy Worski and stealth around, but...
Wait, what?
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
I don't get the reference, but it's probably not important.
It
because
was over the whole Andy Worski debacle. He's being accused of sexual battery for stealthing, and...
He admitted in a live stream that he stealthed, as in... Stealthing is when you remove your condom and engage in unprotected sex without telling your partner that you're doing so.
Yeah.
He admitted in a live stream to doing that, and because...
well, now she knows.
He's kind of an idiot. And later he was complaining that people were digging into his private life. I'm like, nobody dug in anything. You admitted to it live on a live stream that thousands of people were watching. You fucking moron.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, I do have to go in about 5 to 10 minutes here. So I want to get back to the core theme that I've been trying to get to is the burden of proof argument that we got into.
Yeah, sorry we didn't get to that sooner, the burden of proof. I'll say this, that if someone makes, for instance, usually the idea is, and from how it was explained to me, is I would... Okay. Yeah.
Huh? Maybe somebody else is talking. Okay.
No, my microphone's coming loose, but what basically is, if someone, for instance, usually the religious would make the claim. They would say, when people say, "Oh, I don't believe in God," they'll say, "No, He's real." Well, the idea is that if you make the claim, certainly you would know, or at least hopefully you'd know, the standard you would use to try and prove the existence of your God or your religion. Loudmouth points this out quite a bit. That the standard you would use of evidence you would use to disprove Islam or any other religion. Basically, you'd have to find a way to have that not apply to Christianity or any other religion you would use in that model. And usually, the standard you could use to disprove Islam or any other religion, you might be able to use, depending on what basically you could probably use to disprove Christianity. Now, I will say that I do see the error in the kind of explanation I was giving you on Twitter. I will concede that. We cannot directly observe the black hole. We can see it through telescopes, but it is not directly, like we can't grab it, we can't hop inside it,
Yeah.
We can't do that at all.
Couldn't physically interact with it.
Yeah, you cannot physically interact with it.
Or use our senses, or even if we're indirectly measuring it with...
measure the effects of the black hole. The black hole has a massive effect in gravity and space-time around it, and we can measure those effects.
And by that same argument, I say that we can measure the effects of God on the universe.
How would you measure it, though? How exactly would you measure it, though? Because we cannot see God. I don't think we'll have any disagreement.
So we cannot see God, but we can we can detect the origins of the universe, right? That's what we're trying. That's what the entire Big
Correct.
Bang Theory, right? That we can see that the universe is expanding from one central point, right? That's pretty much
singularity they call it.
Yeah, the singularity. Now we don't know of an explanation for that singularity. Now there's plenty of explanations that have been presented. I'm just saying, what if one of those? It's very plausible, or maybe not plausible, but it's very possible that the source of that is when God said, "Let there be light."
But if you're familiar with quantum mechanics, though, in terms of when people say something can't come from nothing, but that happens at the subatomic level all the time with quantum fluctuations. Okay, all right. Basically, at the quantum level, okay, the laws of physics work very differently. An object can be in the same place at two different at the same time in two different places.
Which means reality as we know it is not really reality. It's
yes.
So what you're describing right now is that there is no consistency in the universe. Because matter can come into existence.
With quantum theory, all right, how do I put this? Wish I was a physicist.
No, but
there's really no way a unified theory of everything that rectifies the more stable universe with fixed laws that we see among larger objects and the more unstable universe at the quantum level. But it kind of makes sense, though. According to quantum mechanics, everything is a matter of probability. Something that seems impossible, let's say me passing through a solid object, all right, is not really impossible. It's just so astronomically unlikely that you would have to push against something for an eternity for it to ever happen. All right, but if you have an eternity to work with, all right, a universe pre-Big Bang, okay, where there were no limitations of modern time, all right, something like the Big Bang happening spontaneously may seem unlikely, but it could just be the natural result of quantum mechanics.
Okay, so the natural result was that there's all the particles that we know that make up the universe were all concentrated in one place, trying to pass through one another, and they had a really long time, or an infinite amount of time to do so. So eventually, they had to break free because of the...
Correct.
Here's a little video if you guys want to see it. Basically, it kind of shows... I'll enlarge it right here. This is the black hole. Here's some light. And this is... I don't know if this is... Because it looks like this all right here would go straight into that as it passes by, unless it's too far away.
But no, so the black hole is everything that goes inside that diameter of it can't leave. But what you're seeing right now is the stuff on the outside. It's being drawn to it, but it's not quite in that field yet.
Nothing can escape, not even light.
Yeah,
right? The gravity there is
but
so powerful.
the band that's around it is going towards it because it still has. So outside of that ring, it still has a gravitational pull. It's just not strong enough to keep things from ever leaving. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So I was going to ask you a question earlier. So when you were growing up, were you I'm assuming you probably were raised with a religion. Am I correct, HUMANe?
Yes. So I was raised Pentecostal, and actually, right now, like I said on previous streams, I'm attending Bible studies with the Jehovah's Witnesses because I'm trying to understand where their perspective is, and I actually starting to think that the religious or the view that I had growing up has been like 90% incorrect. And so they're not teaching me out of their own little Mormon book or their own little pamphlets or anything like that. They're using the exact... I've got my Bible that my mom gave to me when I was in 94, when I was in grade school or whatever. And they're showing me the exact same scriptures in the King James Version Bible. Not their own version or their own translation. This is my own Bible from when I was a kid. The exact same scriptures, and I'm like, wait a minute. The Bible says this. Why did I think that differently before? So I'm learning a lot of things that I was taught as a kid. The Bible doesn't even teach. The Bible teaches the opposite. So one thing that I'm learning is Jesus isn't God, which is something that a lot of Christian faiths believe. This is very much going back to the Catholic discussion, is a lot of them say that there's the Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, and they're all three in one. That's not what the Bible says. the Bible specifically calls Jesus the Son of Man, and it also specifically calls Adam the Son of Man. I'm like, wait a minute. But we don't think that Adam was God. Why would Adam be the Son of God and Jesus be the Son of God, but for some reason Jesus is God? No, that doesn't make any sense. If the Bible says Jesus is the Son of God, then Jesus is a direct creation from God the same way that Adam was a direct creation from God. So according to the Bible, Jesus isn't God. And a lot of people pray to Jesus as if he's God, which is not what the Bible teaches. That's something, like, I just learned that a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, that's crazy.
You are correct. You are correct. You are very correct in that.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of passages that where I was told they were read one way, and then I'm looking at them and cross-referencing them with other passages in the same King James Version. I'm like, oh, the Bible doesn't say it. Because, I mean, I was taught, hey, when you die, you go to hell, right? Or if you're a bad person, you go to hell. And so you're trying to be a good person to go to heaven. Apparently, that's not the case. Because the wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is not hell. It is death. If you are a bad person or if you've been disobedient, your punishment is to die and to cease to exist. It is not eternity in hell. It is not, eternal torture, as most people, and I think Loudmouth has brought this up before, and I've tried to justify that to myself in the past, and I'm like, okay, for Hitler, yes, I want him to suffer eternity in hell. That seems like a good, for someone like Loudmouth.
I don't think even Hitler would deserve that.
But for someone just like Loudmouth, who just doesn't believe, wait, an eternity in hell, doing the same thing, burning forever, just like Hitler.
There are religions that justify the murder of non-believers. There's and of other religions.
Well, now, if you're talking about Christianity, then
Islam,
that's not
mostly Islam.
Mostly Islam. I want to clarify. Mostly Islam. That's how they act. Like Christians might think of you as lesser. Some don't. Like Zach, he's very open-minded on this type of to atheists. There's some who think that you're the reason like society is as fucked as it is, and some are like, yeah, you're okay. Some Muslims might be respectful to atheists. Some might want to see you chucked off the rooftop of a building. That type of deal. And
well, the issue with most religions is people who claim to be religious, they don't know the first thing about their religion.
Yeah, that atheists are actually more knowledgeable about most religions than religious people are.
Yeah,
really
that would make sense because the atheists have been debating people about their religious beliefs. And usually the people who believe something, they don't have to even consider it or think about what they believe in until they're confronted by an atheist and they're like, wait a minute, I believe what now? They haven't even considered it prior to that debate happening.
Correct,
exactly. I'll also point out that when it comes to how like religious and non-religious people treat each other is something like I mentioned before. I do criticize the anti-theists.
Yeah. So it is.
All
right. Sorry, I'll let you finish that point, but it is after 7, and I do have to go.
But yeah, no worries. That's basically the idea. Is that it's important. Like if you're going to not believe in God, you don't have to shove it down people's throats. Same with religious people. They did a study, I think, saying that some atheists are way more intolerant than the religious, and I'm not an anti-theist. I think that it's a tad extreme. Like you don't have to be a theist. Opposing theism, I don't see as really that big of a deal. Being against Islam and other like religions, if you're on the grounds of like religion can be used to justify murder, could be used to justify violence. That type of thing, I can see being opposed to. I can understand being opposed to a religion in particular, but just the simple belief of a god or a deity. I don't know. I don't know how I'd feel about that. But you said, actually, since you're going to go, I think I'll wrap it up here. But if you, everyone want to give your closing thoughts, go ahead.
Yeah, I do want to give my closing thoughts. So when it comes to, I've said this previously, for 3 years, I was raised mostly religious, but then 3 years in the Air Force, I was done. I said, okay, you know what? There is no God. There can't be because of all these reasons. And then I lived 3 years as an atheist or whatever. I mean, I wasn't like devout, wasn't trying to convince other people. I just said, okay, I didn't actually change anything about the way I lived. So I was still living as if there was this religion. It's like, hey, I've come this far. Why change now? I was 28. No, this was from the age of 25 to 28. So about between those, I'm like, hey, I'm already, after 25 years, I'm not going to change into a completely different person just based on this one change in my life. So anyway, for 3 years, I was like, okay, there's no God. I'm no longer going to church, no longer reading Bible, no longer doing those sorts of things. But still, hey, the advice there that helps me be a good or a better person or a good person, follow that. And it was through my study of science and economics that I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Some of this stuff doesn't make sense unless there is some outside force. That's what I keep coming back to. And that's what I'm trying to, I was trying to argue with. So the indirect observance of God, there are phenomena in the universe that seem fixed even though there's no physical property fixing them into place. Because, gravity, you can say, okay, there's a physical property to gravity. There's physical property to the orbit of the systems, or there's a physical property to, let's see, some other, to magnetism, and all of these forces that we see, all of these rules of the universe. There's a fixed property of time, like time and space. Those are physical fixed attributes. But, well, I guess maybe time's not so much physically fixed, because it's the change of matter through space that we know time is there.
Yeah.
But there are phenomenon like the Pareto distribution. There's phenomenon like economic principles that should be entirely in human control because we make the rules when it comes to economics. It's all human interaction. As long as we change that human interaction, we should be able to completely change the way economics work. But we can't. It seems fixed in the universe. There's phenomenon like that are fixed, that defy explanation because there's no reason they should be fixed. There's also the origin explanation so it may make sense that all the matter in the universe was all in one place, and then through given enough time it eventually expanded because of that probability it had to, but it doesn't quite explain why there are rules to the universe to begin with. It doesn't explain a whole host of other things, so which is why I'm leaning towards there seems to be rules that are fixed that are not physically fixed, that seem to be in place no matter what we do, even if they should be within our realm of change, but we can't. So there are limitations that exceed the physical. The other thing is we don't have a decent explanation of our origin of life and our origin of the universe as we know it, but it seems to me that a deity would account for all three of those observations. A deity could explain the origins of the universe, the origins of life, and the reason there are fixed rules that should not otherwise be fixed. That's what led me to think, okay, maybe there is some truth to this God thing, but it's not the religion I grew up with because there's contradictions in the religion I grew up with. There's things that don't make sense about the religion I grew up with, which is why I'm looking into different religions. So that was my 2 cents on that. Thanks for the time. We'll be discussing this again next week, although probably on Wednesday, because I think I'm moving my streams to Wednesday.
I would like to give my closing thoughts about time.
Okay. I was going to mention, maybe we can draw in the origin of life and evolution and creationism, as that is something that is I'm currently having to, as I'm currently in a biology class, we're being taught about evolution and things like that, and holy shit, it's Liger's is, that to me that was a totally fucked up thing to do. Basically, Ligers could never have been a thing. That to me was the most fucked up thing you could ever do.
Yeah.
But yeah,
because they're sterile, which is, I mean, it's kind of. Without getting into evolution too much.
My closing statement is, for me, I was raised in a secular household. My parents never mentioned a thing about religion. They weren't going to force it on me. They weren't going to say you can't be involved with religion. However, on the issue of when it came down to it, I was, from how I could define it, I was an atheist. I couldn't care less if you believed in God, you didn't. That was your thing. I just was going to do my own thing. After the death of my grandmother, which hit me pretty hard, I was really hoping there'd be a God, but I wasn't sure how you could tie it to the creation of the earth, and the idea that we'll never truly know. I think I don't think we'll ever truly know, and that's why the religion debate still goes on to this day. And after the Boston bombing, it made me ultimately lose hope. God, that was horrible. Ultimately lose hope that there would be a God, as it seemed like that if God doesn't do anything to help or benefit the earth, but we still might go to hell if we do commit bad actions, always made me say, what's the use to God then? How is he useful to this world if he created it, but he's not going to do anything to intervene for bad things that happen? And over the last few years, I've thought about it a lot, and it was a rather interesting journey to go from someone who didn't care about religion in any respect to someone where every few months I'll have a thing where I'll think about it, and I'll think about religions. And we did have to read up on Christianity in my world civilization class, not to be Christians, but the history that involved in the early periods of the world. Basically, to sum it up, is I do get where HUMANE comes from. I do understand the black hole analogy. I do agree with Loudmouth when it comes to the points that are brought up about contradictions in religious scripture. And I don't have much else to say, but I do want to thank all of you for joining. Thank you, Ivan Jetta. I hope I got that right. Thank you for joining. And I'm going to wrap it up right here. So,
okay.
Yeah. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see you next Wednesday, where we'll be just continuing this discussion, and we might tie in the origin of life and creation.
Yeah. So we'll try to talk more about evolution and the origin of the universe.
Can I give my closing?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Because I want to talk about time. You might talk about time, and I love time. Time is the one thing that we do not understand. Okay, we know how to measure it. It's not something that we understand. It's perfect. It's a stream on its own. If you want to talk about time, time is perfect. What is time?
Perfect. It's totally relative and bendable given various laws of space-time.
If you want to talk, time is an amazing subject on its own.
Like if you
measure it,
if you were at a planet near a black hole, hours for you would be years for outside of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, these are just closing thoughts, so let's let him finish. Although
time is the next stream. Please do make time the next stream.
All right, we'll try to talk about time and of course talk about the origin of the universe and evolution. We'll see if we can get all of that wrapped up in one episode.
I want to because I do have some thoughts on this. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm an electrical engineer, but I do like astrophysics. It's my off subject.
All right, so that's where
what I do want to say is this about religion, about the books. The books were written in a time, right? They weren't written today, and they had a purpose in their time. For instance, you look at the Jewish books; they say don't eat pork. Don't eat pork because eating pork at that time wasn't a very good thing. Wasn't healthy. The thing about circumcision, if you look at it, it comes from everything. These books, and you look at Islam, Christianity, the Torah, or the whatever Jewish books are called, they had their purpose in their time. And this is something that I believe that we should look upon. And this is what I said when the Pope says today that condoms are okay. He's trying to evolve upon an old book, an old guides of life, because these books were guides of life, like
week 3.
Don't eat pork because it's
it's all
not
in
kosher.
week 2.
You cannot
everything should be in week 2, the week
properly
2
have pork in the
initial
desert
plan.
area.
I say
be
everybody just
abstinent
skim
about
over
sex
that
because we do not have
on
any
the
science
section
that
that you
can
worked
prevent
on to make sure
STDs,
everything looks
all
good.
these things.
So if you feel
I'm
like
not
you need to
defending
add more, add
They are not
more. If
perfect.
not, I'm just
Okay?
gonna
but they had
Then
the
what we already
purpose
got
at
that she
their
didn't
time.
grade.
Okay.
And I truly
Oh, it looks like
believe
Tim's
that
on.
if we look upon,
Hey Tim,
like
can you hear us?
We need to.
Human Mind said,
You say we all need to email her and let her
the
know that she
Lutheran
didn't grade number 10
and
week 2.
these new religions
No
that
playtime.
I'm gonna call them new religions
Okay.
Because I do want to wrap this up
Once I
soon.
email,
these
once
new religions that
once
came
I
up
send
after the
everything
Roman
for week
Catholic
5, I'll
Church,
put a little note at the
they
bottom and
tried
ask for the
to
grade week 2.
evolve upon the Roman
Or
Catholic
whatever
Church.
grade she
I
didn't
like
grade,
that.
I'll just
I
ask her
appreciate
if
that.
she could grade it.
I'm Roman Catholic, okay, but I appreciate that. And that is the
Okay, let's
evolution
see where we're
of
at now.
religion,
Okay, that's
guidelines
fine with me.
for life.
Okay,
I'm done.
update project plan.
So, okay, so basically,
forgot what
okay,
that
so that's where we'll
was.
wrap it up. Thank you to everyone who joined. We'll be back next Wednesday instead of Thursday, and I think that's a good idea to move it to Wednesdays.
Well,
Yeah.
And I hope you all have a good night, and until next time.
yeah, that's kind of out of my control, but
Yeah.
work schedule
yeah.
changed, so Wednesday is going to be my new Thursday night.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I have someone who challenged me to a
what I
debate.
need
I don't
to
know
do
if it'll
is
be
recheck my
tonight, but I'll figure it
program,
out later. But y'all have a
put
good
in
one.
all the changes
All
that I
right,
do,
thanks
and
for
then
joining
change
us,
login.
and catch you later.
I wish
Back
you
and
would
redo
do this
the
when it's
integration
4 a.m. for
plan.
me, but yeah.
Implement plan.
I think you